As we have seen in the previous video, the USSR falsified the histories of many Eastern European countries in the 20th century. In Hungary this was compounded by an already existing campaign of mystifying the country's past, which started after the Trianon Treaty of 1920, when the nations controlled by the Austrian Empire were given their rightfully deserved freedom. This reached paranoia levels, and today Hungarians learn that they are descendants of a powerful Asian tribe which established a kingdom that lasted 1,000 years continuously. They learn that they were superior to the other nations of Eastern Europe and that they civilized these inferior savages, and they learn that they had a powerful empire in Europe until the evil French divided their 1,000-year kingdom in many pieces and the inferior Romanians, Slovakians, Serbs, Croats, Ukrainians, etc. occupied their land. This brainwashing would be comical at worst if it wasn't for the many extremist groups of Hungary which are convinced that the official history they are taught is true. They're convinced that they are superior to all neighbors and that it is a holy duty for them to punish these savages and repair the, quote, injustice of Trianon. But let's see what the facts say about Hungarian history. These are some of the most important people in Hungarian history. Matthias Corvinus, the greatest hero in Hungarian history. Nationality, Romanian. Sándor Petőfi, the national poet of Hungary. Nationality, Serbian and Slovakian. Lajos Kossuth, leader of the greatest Hungarian revolution. Nationality, Slovakian. János Zápolya, King of Hungary. Nationality, Croat. Stephen Bathory, Prince of Transylvania. Nationality, Swedish and Polish. Francis Rákóczi II, famous revolutionary. Nationality, Slovakian. Gabriel Bethlen, Prince of Transylvania. Nationality, French. Ion Hunyadi, King of Hungary. Nationality, Romanian. Charles I of Anjou, King of Hungary. Nationality, French, etc. The Hungarian nation does not exist. Asian DNA is almost non-existent in Hungary, and the little there is comes mostly from the Cumans that settled around Budapest in the 13th century because of the Great Mongol invasion. Hungarian is a language like Spanish in South America. Officially the Hungarians are told that the closest languages to their own are the Finnish and Estonian languages. But a Hungarian cannot understand a word of Estonian and a Finn cannot understand Hungarian at all. Hungarian belongs to the Ugric group of languages together with the Khanty and Mansi languages, and even though they have been separated for more than 1,000 years, these languages are today surprisingly similar. The Khanty and Mansi people live in today's Russia, where their old territory, called Ugra, is located. This is where the name Hungary comes from, and this is where the Ugric tribes left towards Europe. As we can see, Hungarians today are totally unrelated to these people. As we have already seen in the previous video, at the arrival of these tribes in Europe, the places they settled in, namely Pannonia and later Transylvania, were inhabited by Slavs and Romanians. They were organized in small states such as that of the Romanian Jala, who ruled in Transylvania, mentioned by various medieval chroniclers such as Anonymous in Gesta Hungariarum. The Asian tribes were joined by other migratory tribes they met on their way to Europe. The 13th century chronicler Simon de Kaiser says that they were organized in 102 clans. Like most other Asian hordes that came to Europe, these tribes robbed and pillaged Europe continuously until they were defeated by the German King Otto the Great and were forced to settle between the Slavs and Romanians in today's Hungary. From there they tried to conquer Transylvania and other eastern lands but failed as well. Transylvania would finally be conquered completely 2 centuries later by the King Bela III. Like France, where the kingdom was called France because of the Franks which conquered it, even though the country was inhabited by the Gauls, so too the lands occupied by the Ugric people started being called Hungary, even though the entire population was made up of Slavs and Romanians and there was not a single Hungarian peasant. The territory would continue to be divided and ruled by many Slav and Romanian rulers. For example, the Romanians continued to have their own small states in today's Transylvania and Hungary, mentioned as Universitas Vlachorum or Estates of the Vlachs in the Hungarian chronicles, up until the 12th century. But they were under the domination of a central Ugric power. This is where the spreading of the Hungarian language started. Everyone who had business with these Ugric rulers had to learn their Asian language. Even after these Ugric people were lost completely, the language of the royal court was still Hungarian. So even though up until 1526, when Hungary disappeared as a state, almost every single king that ruled was not born a Hungarian, they all kept the language in place. The first proper state will be established under the umbrella of the Vatican around the year 1000 when an individual named Vake, a Slavic name, was baptized as a Christian and given the name Stefan. They would later learn Christianity from the local population. For example, the Hungarian word for Christmas, Karácsony, is coming from the Romanian Crăciun, which means creation. Because it was inhabited mostly by Romanians throughout its existence, Transylvania has always been a distinct entity in the Hungarian-speaking medieval kingdom, with its own prince and courts as we have shown before. Actually, the only time in history when Transylvania was an integral part of an independent state named Hungary was during World War II, when Hitler occupied Romania and gave half of Transylvania to his Hungarian-speaking allies. Throughout history, Hungarian speakers showed extreme hatred towards the indigenous Romanian majority. The weak or greedy Romanians that abandoned their language and started speaking Hungarian followed the exact same behavior style until today. The start of the forced spreading of the Hungarian language in Transylvania was taken in 1308 by Charles Robert of Anjou, the then Prince of Transylvania. Until then the Hungarian language was only spoken by a few noblemen and by the rulers. Charles Robert of Anjou was supported by the Vatican, which was always the main player in medieval Hungary, and his mission was to spread Catholicism in Romania. He tried to invade the Romanian lands outside Transylvania, but his army was ambushed and crushed by a small army of Romanian peasants at the Battle of Posada. The Vatican then turned against the Romanian nobleman who ruled the Transylvanian Universitas Vlachorum mentioned earlier. His successor Louis of Anjou, also a Frenchman, issued a law targeting the Romanian nobility in 1366, that required all noblemen to adopt the Catholic faith. As a result, many adopted the Catholic faith and the Hungarian language. For example, the nobleman Candia changed his name into Kendani, John of Hunedoara became Hunyadi, etc. 100 years later, when no more Romanian noblemen were left, having all been converted to Catholicism and Hungarian speakers or being reduced to simple peasants for their refusals, all military power was concentrated in the hands of the Hungarian, Saxon and secular noblemen who banded together against the Romanian majority of Transylvania, which was now composed exclusively of peasants, and formed the Unitrium Nationum, the Union of Three Nations in 1438, which effectively transformed the Romanians into foreigners in their own land and started an apartheid regime. Everyone could occupy the lands of Romanians, who were treated like subhuman. The Romanian peasant became the property of the Hungarian-speaking nobleman and was not allowed to leave the estate. As oppressed as they were, these poor peasants had to support the entire functioning of the Hungarian speakers' kingdom through their taxes, since the noblemen were exempt of any tax. Moreover, until 1730 the Hungarian-speaking tax officers had no salary and made their living exclusively on the back of the peasant through various legal or illegal fines, often extorted through violence. The Hungarian-speaking noblemen were given the right to impale Romanians, called justpătabili, to behead them, called justgladii, to beat and torture them, etc. The name Romanian became synonymous with serf, or slave. Romanian churches were desecrated or converted to Catholic ones, priests were turned into serfs, etc. Talking about the reign of Louis Evangel in his work Rerum Gallicorum, Antonius Bonfini writes that as a result of such practices the Romanians and Slavs were slowly leaving their Orthodox faith and becoming Hungarians, and as such the Catholic religion was practiced by a third of the kingdom at that time. Indeed, the Romanian majority was so threatening to those who abandoned their Romanian language, that in 1568 the Edict of Turda was signed, which strangely accepted heretic faiths like the Unitarianism, but banned the majority religion of Transylvania, the Romanian Orthodoxy. This behavior was in stark contrast to that of the earlier Slavic settlers who repaid the Romanian hospitality by integrating in the local culture and nation. As a result, apart from a large number of bloody revolts, a massive exodus of Romanians to the other Romanian lands outside of Transylvania began. Today, the most common village name in Romania is Ungari, which means the Hungarians or the ones from Hungary. These were all villages founded by Romanians who ran from the genocide happening in Transylvania, to preserve their Orthodox faith and their Romanian language, after the Great Mongol invasion when the Cumans left the lands of Romania and settled in Hungary. The Hungarian kingdom started the colonization of Saxons in Transylvania to better control the lands, since Romanians were seen as a threat. The Saxons would prove to be just as sadistic towards Romanians as those who became Hungarian speakers. For example, the village of Carta is first mentioned when the lands were stolen by the Hungarian king Andrew II and given to Saxons. In the nearby town of Sibiu, like everywhere in Transylvania, Romanians were not allowed to build stone houses. On top of that, the Romanians from the neighboring villages were not allowed to cut wood from the forests either. The one who did would be hanged. If he was not caught, the village had to give another Romanian to be hanged in his place. Romanians would circumvent both these sadistic laws and build clay houses. The Saxons would continuously push the Romanians towards the mountains. Transylvania was then partially covered in forests, so when the Romanians would clear a patch of land and build a village, the Saxons would chase them in the forests again. Some of these villages built inside forests away from the Saxons, such as an unnamed village located next to the Saxon settlement of Singleton in the county of Sibiu, would only be abandoned when Romanians of Transylvania regained their freedom in 1918. Even in that age, in the 20th century, in places like Cristian in the county of Sibiu, the Saxons would not allow Romanians to enter in their villages. The racism of the Saxons would only disappear after Transylvania became free and the Romanians treated the Saxons with respect and without vengeance, unlike the Hungarian speakers, which by the 19th century were treating the Saxons with the same contempt they had for everyone. After the death of Romanian King Mircea the Elder, the kingdom of the Hungarian speakers came under threat from the Muslims. In 1526 Hungary was occupied by the Ottomans and disappeared from history as an independent state until 1920. Transylvania, as always, remained separate from Hungary and remained an independent state as a vassal to the Ottomans until 1600, when the Romanian King Michael the Brave liberated Transylvania for a short time and for the first time after the Roman conquest of the Dacians, united most of the old Dacia in a single kingdom. Transylvanian Count Bethlen writes that as Michael the Brave was defeating the Transylvanian king, the entire Romanian peasantry of Transylvania rebelled and attacked the Hungarian oppressors. Even though Hungary disappeared in 1526, the Hungarian-speaking noblemen continued their savage attacks on the Romanian peasants in their attempts of extirpating the Romanian language from Transylvania. For example, the German Konrad Hildebrand writes that he was shocked by the appalling sights of Romanian peasants being impaled in the villages he passed through. He writes that the Romanians were so oppressed, that they considered hanging a favor instead of impaling. All this time, in spite of the veritable genocide taking place, the strongest of Romanians always held on to their language. Even in mainland Hungary we find a strong Romanian community which in 1631 writes to Holy Roman Emperor Ferdinand II to ask for a Romanian bishop to be allowed to come from the east. Soon after, in 1699, Transylvania loses its independence and becomes part of the Austrian Habsburg Empire along with Hungary. In the army that chased the Ottomans away there were no Hungarian speakers, just as all throughout the Islamic occupation of the Hungarian-speaking lands there were no revolts of the Hungarian speakers. The Austrians continued the savage attempts at transforming Transylvania into a Catholic land and the oppression of the indigenous Romanians. For example, in some areas Romanians were not allowed to build stone churches. But instead of moving to Catholicism, the Romanians started building the famous wooden churches we described earlier, which are still standing today. Moreover, during the reign of Maria Theresa in 1774 a new Christian cult called Greco-Catholicism was invented and some Romanians were forced to convert and their Orthodox churches confiscated. This was identical to the Operation Ugy-Magyars of 1754 when many gypsies of Hungary and Romania were forcefully Catholicized and given Hungarian names. Romanians would continue to be persecuted throughout the existence of the Austrian Empire. For example, Romanians in the region of Banat, today in Romania and Serbia were not allowed to wear good clothes, and thousands of Romanians were used as slave labor and worked to death to construct the Austrian fortress of Alba Iulia. Eventually, after all attempts at converting the Romanians into Hungarian-speaking Catholic speakers failed, the Austrians would start massacring peasants and destroying the Orthodox churches and monasteries through people such as the General Adolf von Buchow who bombed dozens and dozens of Orthodox churches and confiscated the rest for the Catholics. Until 1918 when Transylvania became free, no more Orthodox monasteries would exist in Transylvania. Of course, all throughout the occupation, the Austrians never forgot to steal as much Dacian artifacts and gold as they could, which today fill the Viennese museums. After centuries of aggressive attempts of spreading the Hungarian language, the Hungarian speakers were still just a small minority not only in Transylvania but also in Hungary, where in 1787 the Hungarian speakers formed just 19% of Buda, called Ofen by the Austrians, which was the former capital of the Kingdom of Hungary. For example, data from 1715 shows that Taban, a central neighborhood of Budapest, had 1,538 households of which 769 were Slavic, mostly Serbian, 701 were German, and only 68 were Hungarian-speaking. This is why Maria Theresa called Transylvania Terra Nostra Valahica, meaning our Romanian land, and Stefan Ludwig Roth says in 1846 that Romanian should be the official language of Transylvania. Many revolts were caused by the sadistic behavior of the Austrians towards the Romanian majority in Transylvania. The German geologist Belzazar Hacky, who researched the mountains of Transylvania during 1763 and 1764, wrote about the suffering of the Romanian people during the Austrian occupation, quote, "This oppressed and neglected nation possesses the worst lands in Transylvania. These lands are taken away from them as soon as they are deforested by the Romanians and are ready for agriculture. Every Saxon or Hungarian can take the land of the Romanian even if the latter has been the rightful owner for hundreds of years. The Romanian is chased into the mountains with his entire family where there is nothing but rock, and sometimes he is forced to leave Transylvania. If a Romanian village is placed close to a Saxon or Hungarian village, the Romanians are not allowed to get closer to these two privileged nations than the Gypsies are allowed. Nobody addresses a kind word to the Romanian and he does not have holy days. I will never forget the words of an old Romanian man from Sincoveș, spoken on his deathbed. He said he dies happy because he does not leave behind neither wife nor children in slavery. End of quote. The greatest of these revolts was that of 1784, when the simple Romanian peasants of Transylvania defeated the powerful army of the Austrian Empire, sending shockwaves throughout Europe. So damaged was the Austrian Empire that the peasant that led this revolt, called the King of the Dacians by the Austrian chronicles, was received 3 times by the emperor, something which very few people in the world at that time could manage. We will talk more about this revolt in later videos. As we have shown in the previous video, revolts such as these and claims for fair treatment would cause the Austrian Empire to invent various theories about the origins of the Romanian people, to justify their cruel treatment. These lies would later be taken over by the Hungarian speakers and taught as historical truth in Hungarian schools until today. Weakened by wars and internal revolts, the Austrian Empire was forced to accept the blackmails of the Hungarian speakers, and in 1867 an autonomous region called Hungary was created inside the Austrian Empire, which also included Transylvania and the other Romanian lands. Hungarian schoolbooks today say that this was the fabled quote, Greater Hungary, and it is these lands that the paranoid Hungarian nationalists are hoping they will one day conquer again. Even though inside this autonomous region of the Austrian Empire Hungarian speakers were just a small minority. Although the Hungarian schoolbooks say that this province of the Austrian Empire was independent and an equal partner to the Austrians, the Hungarian speakers did not have anything to say in the important business of the empire, such as external affairs. For example, in 1914 nobody asked the Hungarian speakers if World War I should be started. The Austrians just commanded the Hungarian speakers to fight, because all power was in the hands of the Austrians, and the Hungarians were just tolerated and only allowed to rule the area that was assigned to them in 1867. The 1867 pact was possible because the Austrian Empire was weakened by wars and revolutions, such as the 1848 revolution. Unlike other European nations which joined the Masonic revolutions of 1848 for higher ideals, the Hungarian speakers saw this revolution as a means to gain dominance over the other nations existent in Eastern Europe and force them to become Hungarian speakers as well. The leader of the 1848 revolution of the Hungarian speakers was the ultranationalist psychopath Lajos Kossuth. His views of the Romanian people were expressed in the Kossuth Hírlapja, or Kossuth's News Bulletin on October 24, 1848. Quote, "You can subjugate the Romanians like cattle, of which they differentiate only because they can talk." Born of Serb and Slovakian parents, he would be the one who would channel the racism and hatred of the minority of Hungarian speakers towards the majority formed by the other nations of the Austrian Empire. In Transylvania, he would organize a genocide of the Romanian population, murdering over 40,000 innocent men, women and children, erasing over 230 villages from the face of the earth, and demolishing every Orthodox church and monastery he could find, until the Romanian peasants would once again revolt and crush the Hungarian speakers' army. This genocide was preceded at the 15th of March 1848 by the proclamation of the Hungarian speakers' revolution. Point 12 said that Transylvania was to be incorporated into Hungary, even though the Hungarian speakers formed only 12% of the population of Transylvania. The only right that Lajos Kossuth would recognize for the Romanian majority of Transylvania was that of assimilating into the Hungarian speakers' nation. The genocide of the Romanian population was announced on the 10th of October 1848 by Lajos Kossuth in his appeal to the Romanian people, in which he said, quote, "Beware Romanian people, don't cause your complete annihilation. Our army will promptly head towards you, and then it would have been better if you would have never been born. We will command all Hungarians and settlers to rise up and like a storm to sweep all the ungrateful garbage, and to erase from the face of the earth all traitors of the fatherland. Those who won't listen to us will die by the hand of the henchman or by the sword." End of quote. At the order of Lajos Kossuth, the Hungarian speakers would unleash an unprovoked bloodbath in Transylvania, resulting in one of the biggest ethnic cleansing atrocities in the history of Europe. This genocide was led by 13 generals who, after slaughtering tens of thousands of Romanians and erasing hundreds of Romanian villages, are today heroes of the Hungarian speakers nation and viewed as martyrs. The American historian Milton G. Lehrer writes about the racist atrocities of the 13 generals, quote, "Executions were followed by fires, which were followed by massacres." End of quote. Still not happy with the bloodbath, the genocidal maniac Lajos Kossuth issued another proclamation on the 22nd of December 1848 calling for the extermination of Romanians, calling them "stinking vlachs, a horde lower than cattle," etc. Laszlo Ksany, a close friend of Lajos Kossuth, was put in charge of the operation, and he created the famous blood tribunals which caused the death of any innocent man, woman and child that had the wrong blood, that of a Romanian. He formed hunting parties made up of Hungarians and seculars, in charge of ethnic cleansing of Romanians from Transylvania. 236 Romanian villages would end up erased from the face of the earth and over 40,000 innocent Romanian peasants massacred. The Romanian peasants eventually rebelled and defeated the Hungarian speakers' armies, which allowed the Austrian Empire to crush the Hungarian speakers' revolution. In stark contrast to the Hungarian speakers' leaders, the peasants that led the Romanian Revolution called for mercy for the Hungarian captives and for a fair behavior towards innocent civilians. For example, in October 1848 one leader of the peasants, Axentiseva, issued a proclamation towards the Romanian peasants' army saying, quote, "If you find any Hungarian soldiers lost in the forests, disarm them, give them some bread and set them free." Likewise, on the 9th of October 1848 the Romanian National Committee formed in the town of Sibiu issued an order saying, quote, "Nobody dare touch another person or his property, be it Romanian, Hungarian, Jew or any other nation, because all people have a right to their life and property and we owe the same respect for all." End of quote. We will discuss this Romanian revolt in later videos, so here we will only mention one interesting Romanian leader of this peasant revolt. This was Pelagia Rosu, a woman. At March 12, 1849 the Hungarian speakers' army was approaching the village of Marizal to conquer it. The men were all gone joining the Romanian Revolution to help stop these atrocities, and only women, children and old men were in the village. Pelagia Rosu told all women to wear their husbands' clothing, and riding the men's horses they charged towards the Hungarian-speaking army, which got scared and started running away. The women suffered no losses and killed 30 Hungarian speakers. A further 100 Hungarian speakers drowned while desperately trying to cross a frozen river to try to escape from the Romanian women. The Saxons of Transylvania were also victims of the genocidal madness of the Hungarian speakers' leaders. Still, in the West the ethnic cleansing happening in Transylvania was presented as a fight for the liberation of the Hungarian speakers, such as in America for example, where in a time when Indians were seen as subhuman and blacks as cattle, nobody bothered checking the accuracy of the reports coming from the Masonic newspapers. The few who dared say the truth about the genocide happening in Transylvania were persecuted, such as the Harvard professor Francis Bowen, who was kicked out from the university after writing the book, The War of Races in Hungary, showing the truth that the American media was hiding. After abandoning the Hungarian speakers and fleeing for his life, Lajos Kossuth would eventually end up in America as well, where he would tour the country spreading all kinds of lies about the situation in Europe. In a banquet given in New York on December 15, 1851 he would say for example, that the Croats and the Serbs were not forced, but they themselves were asking to learn the Hungarian language. This genocidal psychopath is today one of the greatest heroes of the Hungarian speakers, and the date of the start of his revolution is the National Day of Hungary. To the ethnic cleansing that Kossuth started, The Serbian-born Petofi Sanda took part as well. Today he is the national poet of Hungarian speakers, and through his poems the flame of the ethnic cleansing was lit and kept burning. For example, in June 1848 he published the poem Magyarnép, or the Hungarian people. Here are some verses from this poem, quote, "Only the Hungarian has the rights of a master here, and those who want to get on our head will feel our feet on their heads and our spurs through their hearts." In September 1848 he wrote a Litvajihol, or Life and Death, calling the Croats, Serbs, Slovakians, Germans and Romanians, quote, "only hungry and disgusting crows." The poem goes on to say that the Hungarians will paint the sunrise on the sky using the blood of these nations, and asks that peace should not come until every drop of blood from the hearts of these nations is gone, and calls the Hungarians to rise against this, quote, "damned herd." Petofi Sanda would go on put his sadistic poems into practice during the Hungarian speakers' revolution until he was caught by the Russians and sent to Siberia to pay for his crimes. These are the crimes committed by the soldiers commanded by this individual, who is today the national poet of Hungary. On January 1, 1849 he proclaimed, quote, "Let us give them such a death sentence that the world will be amazed. Let us know no mercy." 90 years later another Hungarian author, Ducsok Saba, would instill the same bloodthirst leading to the anti-Romanian Hungarian atrocities of World War II in his famous book Nincs Kegyelem, or No Mercy. Many other Hungarian poets and writers expressed the same infinite hatred towards the Romanians. Dugan Alexandras wrote, "Don't believe these deceivers until they have assimilated into the Hungarian nation." Joseph Bajza wrote that he is not afraid of the Slovak and Romanian people which the Hungarians ruled, saying that the Hungarians are the only people of God. Dordila Rand wrote, quote, "I will suppress every Vlach I can find. No mercy. I will put the entire population through the sword, poison the wells, kill the babies, until there is only one race in Transylvania, the Hungarian one." As we have mentioned before, the 1848 revolution of Hungarian speakers was one of the causes of the pact that created a province named Hungary inside the Austrian Empire in 1867, when Hungarian speakers were made rulers of this province even though they formed only a small minority. Until the First World War, Hungarian speakers would rule this region with an iron fist, and during this period the majority of the latter Hungarian nation would be born through forced assimilation. All the institutions were contrived for the exclusive dominance of the Hungarian speakers, who were a minority in their own country, but viewed the Slavs, Romanians and others as inferior beings. For example, Hungarian was the only language used in state schools, in street naming, in teaching the Bible, etc. Thousands and thousands of Romanians, Slovaks, Serbs, Germans, etc. were forced to adopt Hungarian names. Political trials would throw the Romanian elite in jail. The electoral law for Transylvania was distinct from the rest of the Hungarian-ruled area, since in Transylvania the Romanians were the majority. The goals were to push the Romanians towards cultural and economical regress in order to assimilate them more easily. Most Romanian schools were closed and replaced with Hungarian schools. So determined were the Hungarian speakers to assimilate the entire Romanian nation from Hungary and Transylvania, that they issued a special law exclusively targeting Romanian schools, the Istoria Law. In 1907 a so-called Magyarization manual was produced for the members of the Hungarian government, detailing the steps that needed to be taken to forcefully assimilate the non-Hungarian majority. These steps included the destruction of ethnic unity of Romanians through a new territorial organization of electoral constituency, the abolishment of the autonomy of the Orthodox Romanian Church, the closing of preparatory schools for Romanian teachers and the forcing of such would-be teachers to learn only in Hungarian institutions and only in the Hungarian language, aggressive state control of any Romanian cultural organization. the disinformation of European public opinion through the falsification of census data, etc. The same measures were taken against all other nations that were ruled by the Hungarian-speaking minority, and this is how the Hungarian nation was born during the 19th and 20th centuries. For example, the town of Crista was inhabited mostly by Romanians in 1866. After the Hungarians got in control in 1867, the Romanian priest was chased away, the church closed, Germans and Hungarian-speaking gypsies brought in, and the Romanian names changed. Today everyone there speaks Hungarian. On the 9th of May 1891, the Hungarian central newspaper Pesti Holnap was jubilating about the fact that people from a Slovakian village were forced, through violence, to listen to the church sermon in the Hungarian language. Around the same time, there was no gymnasium using the Slovak language in entire Slovakia. Bela Grunwald wrote that the purpose of the schools of that era was to take in young Slovaks and give out true Hungarians. Also in 1890, in Budapest, whereas we have seen a century earlier the Germans were in a majority, there was not a single school that used the German language, although in Budapest still lived 120,000 Germans that were not yet assimilated. A century earlier, in 1728, the hatred of Germans in Hungary pointed the German colonizers of Ardud to ask the Habsburg Empire to colonize them somewhere else, since they said it was impossible to live among Hungarian speakers. Dr. Julius Jung wrote in 1877 to describe the assimilation policy, quote, "The Hungarians as a people are full of pride. They have always demanded that the nations they live amongst to accept their domination and language. In censuses, for example, the determination to show that Hungarians are more than in reality is evident." End of quote. In just a few decades the centuries-long dream of the Hungarian speakers became a reality. Dr. Ksanki Dezső wrote in 1894 that in the 15th century the number of Hungarian settlements was negligible, since most Hungarian speakers were the rulers and the warriors. In 1876 the linguist Paul Hunfilvy, writing about the population of Hungary in 1763, said that, quote, "The smallest part of Hungary is that is inhabited only by Hungarian speakers, and the Hungarian language might have disappeared back then." In 1840 Hungary contained 37% Hungarian speakers, but in 1910 the percentage rose to 48%. The assimilation policy was successful, and after the Treaty of Trianon in 1920, when the nations occupied by the Austrians were set free, for the first time in history a country where the Hungarian speakers were a majority was formed. The assimilation continues today, making Hungary one of the most ethnically pure countries in Europe. One of the most famous examples of the anti-Romanian policy of the Hungarian speakers of the Austrian Empire is that of Bădea Cătăan, an old man from the village of Carter that we mentioned earlier. He traveled on foot to Rome to see Trajan's column, and also traveled extensively through the free Romanian lands outside Transylvania to gather Romanian books to take to the Romanians in Transylvania. He was thrown in prison many times by Hungarian authorities for bringing Romanian books into Transylvania. His last wish was to die outside Transylvania in the free Romanian lands. On the 4th of June 1907, 76,621 Romanian books gathered by Bădea Cătăan would be burned by the Hungarian authorities in their paranoid attempts at suppressing the Romanian language in Transylvania. But these were not the only means of destroying the Romanian culture in Transylvania. For example, the Hungarian antiques dealer Samuel Nemes in 1834 falsified some Roman wax tablets to try and quote-unquote prove that the Roman Empire used some Proto-Hungarians in the gold mines of Dacea, in order to show that Hungarians were present in Transylvania for 2,000 years. This practice is still continued today, when the Hungarian speakers in Romania are doing all they can to suppress historical and archaeological information about the Romanian people, such as in Gigodin, where the authorities, Hungarian speakers, demolished a Dacian archaeological site under the excuse that they were building a telecommunications antenna. Many Dacian treasures were stolen and taken to Budapest, such as the items loaded onto a military train in 1944, which was officially quote-unquote bombarded as soon as it reached Hungary. In 1914 Austria went to war, and along with it the Austrian province named Hungary. Romania would join the fight against Austria to liberate Transylvania from its oppressors. Thousands and thousands of Romanians from Transylvania crossed the mountains, risking their lives, since any Romanian caught crossing the border would be hanged by the Hungarian speakers, and joined the Romanian army. Today the majority of Transylvanian towns and villages have commemorative monuments with long lists of such Transylvanian Romanians who gave their life for the liberation of Transylvania from the Austrians and the Hungarian speakers. Austria lost the war, and in 1918 Romanians from all corners of Transylvania sent their representatives to the town of Alba Iulia, where a union with Romania was voted. The German community of Transylvania also voted for union with Romania. The Romanian army entered Transylvania and chased the armed Hungarians out of the country. As they left, the Hungarian speakers left a trail of massacres. They mutilated, burned alive, tortured and killed many innocent peasants in villages such as Bologa, Morlica, Bălăz, Mihalt, Filii de Sus, Cavacinti, Torti, Mandru, Poieni, Sohodol, etc. In the next year Hungary was occupied by the Bolshevik regime of the Jubilee Kun, or Cohen, who tried to implement the same Bolshevism that was savagely implemented in Russia at that time. The Romanian army promptly intervened and occupied Budapest and saved Hungary from Bolshevism. The Hungarian propaganda machine would once again start rolling out false stories in the West, saying that the Romanians were pillaging Budapest and committing atrocities. But honest witnesses such as the American journalist Charles Upson Clark described the true situation for posterity. He writes in his book Great Romania, published in 1922, that before he left for Budapest he was under the influence of the Hungarian propaganda and was expecting a chaotic and violent occupation of the Romanians. He goes on to say that not only the Romanians did not take revenge for the 1,000 years Romanian genocide done by Hungarian speakers and demolish Budapest as he was expecting, but they actually normalized the life of the people of Budapest. He writes that the food captured from the Bolshevik army was given to the starving population of post-war Budapest, and that 4 trains were used to continuously supply Budapest with food. This made the cost of living in Budapest to be even less expensive than in Bucharest, the capital of Romania. Cultural activities were also resumed under Romanian occupation, and the journalist describes his array of choices of various theatrical plays and art expositions that were available. He writes that even horse races were resumed. Nothing was suppressing the life of average Hungarians in Budapest, and the fact that 150,000 gathered at one time to discuss the political future of Hungary is evidence for that. The Hungarian speakers left in Romania after the liberation of Transylvania were treated with the same respect. For example, 81,000 poor Hungarian-speaking families left in Romania were given free land after 1918, during the agrarian reforms. At the Treaty of Trianon in 1920, for the first time after 1526, an independent state named Hungary was created in Europe. Unlike in the Middle Ages, this time the Hungarian speakers formed the majority of the population. Oddly, the Hungarian speakers were not happy that for the first time in their history they had their own state and were the majority of that state, but viewed the liberation of the other nations trapped in the Austrian Empire as a tragedy. In their desperate attempt at gaining control over the Romanian lands again at the Treaty of Trianon, the Hungarian party would support their case by claiming that the Romanian is an inferior race that needs guiding from the Hungarians and Germans. They would also resort to distortion of Transylvanian history. For example, The Hungarian delegation argued that the chronicles that said that the Romanians already lived in Transylvania when the Ugric tribes arrived, such as that of Anonymous, are not trustworthy. Strangely, at the same time the Hungarian delegation was saying this, in the center of Budapest a large statue of the chronicler Anonymous reigned supreme, showing how ready to tell lies the Hungarian speakers were. Tens of thousands of Romanians were trapped in the new state of Hungary. Today only a few villages are left. A similar thing happened to the other nations that were trapped in Hungary after the Treaty of Trianon in 1920. Almost all were assimilated. This was the moment when the Hungarian government started falsifying the country's past, to justify their claims for land from their neighbors. For example, to try to show that the medieval king of Hungary John Hunyadi was not Romanian, the names in his genealogy were changed to show that he comes from some Asian migratory tribes. The Hungarian historians would construct through similar means a mythical past of Hungary, one which says that the country endured for 1,000 years in Europe and was the only source of civilization in an area inhabited by inferior savages who repaid the Hungarians by stealing land from this legendary kingdom. LOL. This brainwashing was one of the causes of the Hungarian atrocities committed against Serbians and especially Romanians during World War II. Hitler needed to get his hands on the oil of Romania, without which World War II would have ended before it started, so he allied with everyone who had a claim on Romanian land. He first gave part of Moldova to Stalin and then split Transylvania in two and gave a part to Hungarians who accused him in 1940 of quote-unquote discrimination, for not giving them Romanian land like he gave to Stalin. That part of Transylvania would be the only part of Romania where Jews would be sent to the concentration camps during World War II. Approximately 200,000 Jews from the occupied part of Transylvania were sent by Hungarian Admiral Horthy, today a hero of Hungarians of course, to the concentration camps. The Hungarians that entered Transylvania were driven partly by the false history they learned and partly by poems of sadistic murderers like war criminal Albert Wass, who was convicted for murdering innocent Romanians and is today a respected Hungarian poet with statues all over the areas inhabited by Hungarian speakers. This hatred would once again express itself as an ethnic cleansing of Romanians from Transylvania. After Hitler forced the Romanian army to withdraw from the occupied part of Transylvania, the Hungarian soldiers unleashed a genocide against the defenseless women, children and simple Romanian peasants of Transylvania. Not even unborn babies were spared. The official statistics put together by the Romanian army after World War II records 919 killings, 717 cases of mutilations, 3,373 cases of beatings, 13,369 cases of arrests, 117 cases of Orthodox Church destruction, 501 cases of devastations of Romanian towns and more than 500,000 Romanian refugees that escaped into Romania. Unofficially the numbers are higher. After the war, a band of Romanians went into the Hungarian-speaking areas and killed 11 Hungarians and injured another 2, until they were caught by the Romanian authorities and sent to trial. The Hungarian speakers claim that this was an ethnic crime similar to the crimes committed by the Hungarians throughout their history. The locals told the police that the victims were a result of a local fight, however.
Unguri, soldații, pe cine se întâlnea cu civili aici, îi pușca.
Când soseau ungurii în Zalău, M-am dus să văd cum vine armata ungurească. Nu am stat până seara, am văzut cum au venit trupele, săreau unguroși, la ei sărutau, ei, Modiorul să trăiască Ungaria și Urale și așa. Și au trecut în grămadă ungurii din Tresne, pe acolo și ne-au văzut și unul să ne întâlnim de seară la Lengel, era o crijmă Lengel. Și acolo am văzut pe unguri, apoi cu soldații de unguri de braț, cântau acolo și beau împreună și soldații mai luau banetul, băteau în masă, ola vir forini, ai să bea sânge de valah, așa zice. 3 ofițeri intră și crupa era acolo. Zice că el, megírkeztünk egy zászlói, mikor virott körülveszük a falut, és vágjuk őket, mint a rép. Înseamnă că am sosit un batalion, în zorii zilei înconjurăm satul și tăiem ca pe sfeclă.
Torcând Ghibon urma, asând că vine cu câteva pușcături de aici din pădurea asta, este o pădure aici, de la biserică încolo. 4-5 pușcături. Pe urmă am văzut că dă cu mitraliere și cu tunuri de astea ușoare în biserică. Atunci am văzut că nu-i bine.
Am văzut o jumătate de oră că se trăgea cu tunul, era foc și începuseră aici pe măgură să ardă vreo 20 de case.
Am văzut că arde casa tătuc. Băi, dar ce fac? Ce e acolo? Arde. Când pe tătuca l-a pușcat,
când am ajuns acasă, era bunica și cu un văr al tătuchii, se spăla la pământul, la haloi, așa spunem noi, unde avea vicile apă. De sânge cum a fost pe măicuța în pat. Că măicuța o tăiată toată po tăiată în sat, deși sânii și mâinile, numai la față nu a fost tăiată.
Pe unele femei, pe mama lui ăsta care a fost ale Labu, din Banietă a omorât. Și peste drum a fost a familiei de evrei, pe aceea pe 2 bătrâni și 2 fete, numai din Banietă i-a omorât. Și mai încolo un vecin, iară, din Banietă a fost o fată și o femeie, la familia lui Lazar Ion.
și așa s-a făcut până s-a făcut 86 de morți. Bătrâni, tineri, copii, femei, tot felul.
Pământ. După câteva secunde, comandantul a ordonat încolonarea, direcția curtea școlii. Aici erau cel puțin 20 și ceva de cetățeni maghiari, împreună cu baronul, preotul reformat și învățătorul. Ne-au întrebat de comandant ce se va întâmpla dacă Ardealul va fi dat înapoi cândva României. Comandantul a răspuns, veți primi replica. Cetățenii au spus că nu suntem de acord. Și atunci comandantul a spus, hai să-i executăm pe toți din comună. Cetățenii s-au sculat în picioare și au aplaudat și au spus că are dreptate domnul comandant. În momentul în care s-a făcut echipe pe fiecare stradă, condus de cetățeni maghiari. Astfel că pe la ora 3 după miezul nopții au început masacrul pe străzi.
Umblau cu grupurile astea înarmate de hortiști și arătau, aici stau români, aici stau români.
Și după câteva secunde am auzit că au intrat la spatele căsii. Acolo ușa era încuiată. Au bătut la ușă, mătușa n-a deschis ușa și atunci au tras un cartuș prin geam. Am auzit cum au sunat sticlele când au împușcat. Și atunci a ieșit afară toată familia și am auzit împușcături și țipetele copiilor.
Se auzeau rafale de împușcături și se auzeau cum țipau femeile. Nu mi-l lua, lasă-mi-l că e al meu, nu ți-l dau. Și pe noi iar rafale de împușcătură și liniște.
Și am spus, tată, aceștia omoară, împușcă românii. Tata n-a mai avut cuvânt, n-a putut să vorbească nimic.
Și ne-au spus să ne așezăm toți unul lângă altul, să ridicăm mâinile și să nu ne mișcăm. Și bineînțeles că am început să plângem.
Am văzut focul de patrone cum trăgeau în mine. M-am speriat și m-am culcat lângă taică meu care era deja culcat la pământ.
Și tata, în momentul în care a tras și eu plângeam, tata ne împușcă și dădeam din picioare, s-a întors, l-a nimerit glonțul și m-a tras sub el.
După ce au fost executat toată familia, ne căuta cu lanterna. Care mai mișcă, pentru că nu au fost împușcați mortal toți. Și care mai mișca, trăgeau până când vedea că nu mișcă.
Toți erau morți. L-am cârțit puțin pe tata, tata era căzut pe bord. Mama care era lângă mine era tot cu mâinile ridicate, dar îi curgea o șuviță de sânge din gură. Am încercat, nimic. Lângă ea era domnica, avea 18 ani. Și ea era liniștită, culcată, căzută pe spate și cu dura de sânge din gură. Mi s-a spus pe urmă că probabil că au nimerit-o în inimă. Susana, care avea 21 de ani, ea avea și fetița, era căzută, dar în jurul ei erau bucăți de carne din ea. Pentru că au folosit gloanțe care explodau și rupeau carne din trupul omului.
De la momentul ăsta și până la ora 8 n-am avut curajul să mă scol de la pământ, deoarece s-auzea vorbind. Și mi-era frică că dacă mă scol, mă execută.
Și atunci eu am zis, ce fac? Primul lucru am zis să fug la sora mea care stătea alături. Aveam o soră căsătorită alături. M-am dus la ea. Acolo i-am găsit morți și pe ea, și pe soțul ei, și pe socrul ei. Se vedeau două trupuri întinse, în alb. Și am spus, vai, ce bine, înseamnă că Leontina a scăpat. Și am intrat curajoasă în casă. A scăpat Leontina. Am intrat acolo unde dormea ea. Am găsit-o lângă pat. Se zvârcolise. Căzuse din pat. Nu știu, dar în tot cazul se vedea cum s-a zvârcolit. Era moartă. Zic, nu-i nimic. Am văzut-o pe Viorica, nepoțica mea de 2 ani și 8 luni. Și am zis, poate a scăpat ea, și am luat-o în braț. Când am luat-o în brațe, nu mai avea jumătate din cap. Îi retezaseră asta, partea din spate.
În capătul comunei, spre comuna Porț, era familia Lontea Gheorghe. Femeia trebuia să nască și îl trimitea pe bărbatul său, că era în dureri de naștere, du-te după moașă.
Și nu l-au lăsat să meargă după moașă pentru că au spus că o ajută ei. Și au ajutat-o. I-au sfârșiat burta și au omorât-o și pe ea și copilul.
Și sora mea de 11 luni, când am intrat în casă, după ce m-am sculat de la pământ, era plină de sânge și spartă cu baioneta în pat. La spatele căsă a rămas un copil de 1 an în leagăn. Eu eram în podul casei, auzeam tot ce se vorbea. Soldatul a spus către un țigan, îi cunoșteam vocea la țigan, zice, uite ce-i în casă. Când a ieșit țiganul, a întrebat, ce-i în casă? E un copil în leagăn. Ce face? Râde. A intrat soldatul și am auzit 2 împușcături. Dimineața, pe la ora 9, au adunat cadavrele. Cetățenii din comună cu căruțele.
Și atunci am văzut șirul de căruțe care urcau spre biserică. Oamenii spuneau, eu nu mi-am dat seama, oamenii spuneau, probabil că morții la grob.
La adunarea cadavrelor pe care i-a dus la cimitir a fost un singur român prezent, scurtul Victor de 18 ani. Acesta mi-a detailat tot ce s-a petrecut la cimitir.
Am stat așa acolo toată ziua până când s-a terminat șirul de căruțe. Nu plângeam, nu vorbeam, întrebam numai în care căruțe sunt ai mei.
La cimitir, două persoane, Sârca Maria de 40 de ani și Ola Maria de 15 ani, nu erau moarte. Mai suflau. Totuși au fost aruncate în groapă.
Când au ajuns căruța cu ai mei ca să-i înmormânteze, acolo erau adunați unguri mulți. Unul dintre ei a luat un par și a crăpat capul tatălui meu și a zis să aibă impozit în plus. Poutodou, cum se zicea la noi în Ardeal. Poutodou. Și a crăpat capul. Și altul, ca să se arate și mai grozav, când au coborât-o pe mama, înainte de o arunca în groapă, a zis că el vrea să vadă cum este grăsimea de biuțășola, că mama era o femeie voinică. Și a despicat-o în două și pe urmă a aruncat-o în groapă. S-a bătut toba, că așa se anunța la noi, s-a bătut toba că cei care au scăpat la Ib să meargă acasă. Și rudele tatălui m-au luat de mână și au zis, hai să mergem. În graj să avea grijă de că aveam vaci, boi, mă rog, multe, o gospodărie mare era. Era bărbatul lui Ilunconeini. Și când m-a văzut, foarte bucuros, a scos din sân un steag unguresc și mi l-a arătat. Și a zis, uită-te, eu l-am ținut înmormântat 20 de ani, dar uită-l că a înviat, dar ai tăi nu mai vin înapoi.
În tot cei 4 ani de dominația maghiară, n-a fost voie să se pună cruce la mormântul martirilor.
During the communist era, from 1944 to 1990, the Hungarians were again treated with respect by the Romanian authorities and were even given their own autonomous region. Hungarian speakers were overrepresented in the ruling Communist Party. Hungarian speakers never abandoned their dream of owning Transylvania again, however, and in 1989 we find them plotting an overthrow of the communist regime and the creation of an independent Transylvania with a view of incorporating it into Hungary later. Following a massive campaign in the Western media denigrating the communist regime of Romania, going as far as accusing Romania of being a nuclear threat to the world peace, a group of Hungarian speakers, Jews and Romanian traitors signed a declaration at Budapest on the 16th of June 1989 that called for a new Republic of Transylvania to be created from the Romanian state, with its own coin and embassies. This plot was followed by the organization of a regional ethnic conflict in Transylvania in March 1990. Thousands of Hungarian speakers crossed the border into Romania in the weeks leading up to this event, claiming to bring help for the Romanians. On the anniversary of the ethnic cleansing started by Lajos Kossuth in 1848, on the 15th of March, the agitation started in the Transylvanian town of Mureș, which had a mixed population. Hungarians were called to the streets and Romanians were tricked to go to the town center to protect some compatriots who were allegedly being beaten. The Western media again started telling lies about the situation, saying that the Romanians were committing a quote-unquote genocide against the Hungarians. Apparently the Romanian secret services knew about this plot and the authorities took no measures against the Hungarian rioters and thus the Hungarian plot failed.
Din balconul de unde s-a condus mitingul, la începutul încăierării și pe toată desfășurarea ei, o voce în limba maghiară a transmis prin megafoane sugestii cum să se desfășoare acțiunile manifestanților. De televiziunea irlandeză în acea zi de 20 martie 1990. Reportajul a șocat întregul continent datorită violenței cu care grupuri de manifestanți se confruntau, a cruzimii cu care au fost atacate persoane izolate, care, din întâmplare, au ajuns în grupul advers. Dintre toate atrocitățile, lovirea de repetate ori cu bestialitatea unui om căzut pe jos, inconștient, a rămas în memoria milioanelor de
Einrichtung einer eigenen ungarischen Universität hat dieser Demonstrant auf seinem Plakat gefordert, bevor er brutal zusammengeschlagen wurde.
Spuneți-mi însă, atunci când ați fost în Germania la tratament, cum s-au purtat românii de acolo? V-au vizitat mulți români din Germania?
Nu m-au vizitat nimeni, din câte ambasada română. Vine de 2 ori pe săptămână la mine acolo la spital.
De la televiziune n-a fost nimeni, de la CDF și toate posturile acelea care au prezentat cazul Cofaru exact pe dos, n-a fost nimeni?
Nu a fost nimeni.
Again the Romanian authorities followed the millenary Romanian tradition and did not take revenge on the Hungarian traitors. Romania changed its legislation after the fall of communism and is today the most tolerant country in Europe with respect to its minorities. In fact, due to the separation of Romanians in various parties, nothing can move in Romania without the acceptance of the Hungarian minority who always votes with the Hungarian Speaker's party, since almost every single government coalition had to include the Hungarian party in order to gain a majority in the parliament. Thus Hungarians had power both at the central level and also absolute power in the regions inhabited by a Hungarian-speaking majority. The spreading of the language continues through all kinds of measures. For example, to be able to get a job with a local authority run by the Hungarians, even janitors and garbage collectors have to speak Hungarian. Moreover, local newspapers have uncovered many cases where the local authorities refused various investments in the area in order to keep the areas from developing and Romanians from coming and settling there. As a result of this perverted nationalism, the areas inhabited by Hungarian speakers are among the poorest in Romania, although Hungarian speakers are always in power at all levels, from the government to the local authorities. Attempts at creating an autonomous area in Transylvania, independent of the rest of Romania, are also being made continuously, coupled with all kinds of chauvinistic behaviors such as celebrating various murderers that we have mentioned before and raising statues for them, printing alternate history books that contain the old theories fabricated by the Habsburg Empire, etc. In Hungary too, the small Romanian community that is still alive there is being assimilated through various measures. For example, in the only high school in Hungary where the Romanian children are allowed to learn using their mother tongue, a falsified history of the Romanian people is being taught. It says that Romanians are actually Albanians who settled with their sheep in Transylvania a long time after the Ugric tribes arrived in a totally empty Transylvania, and then started multiplying really fast until they became a majority. The history of the Hungarian speakers in relation to Romania is identical to that of all other nations of Europe that came into contact with Hungarian speakers. Their current behavior will most likely continue until the cycle of lies is stopped and the Hungarians learn their true history. An ugly truth is always better than a beautiful